Today we are looking at the lesson 15.1 and 15.2 notes. It's also got some of chapter 12 mixed in, so it's kind of a long set of notes. We are looking at how to convert fractions into percents and then percents into fractions, going from fraction to decimal and decimals back to fractions, and how to go from a decimal to a percent and a percent to a decimal. So you can see there are 6 different little conversions to look at. Some of those you already know how to do, and some will be new. This is a set of notes that you might want to hang on to because all 6 conversions are here with examples and you tries, and it's the sort of thing that you might want to keep to look back at. So we're going to start with writing percents as decimals. To write a percent as a decimal, you first remove the percent symbol, then you divide by 100, or simply you can just move the decimal 2 places to the left. You might need to put 1 or more zeros in the number in order to move it. So for this example, I would take out the percent symbol and I would move my decimal back 2 places to the left. So 23% turns into 0.23 or 23 hundredths. And that makes sense if we think about percent means per hundred. Everything having to do with percent is going to be around 100. So if I've got 23%, well, that means 23 hundredths. So if I want to write 52% as a decimal, I can take out that percent sign. I move the decimal back 2 places to the left, and that equals 52 hundredths. So it's just like the example here. If I want 7%, this time when I move 2 places to the left, I have to add a 0. So 7% is the same as 7 hundredths. You have 4 U tries. 2 are like that, and then you have one where you have something that is bigger than 100, and you have something that has a decimal in it, but you do them the same way. The second section, now we want to go the other way. So now we have a decimal, and we want to change it into a percent. To do that, you multiply by 100, or just move the decimal 2 places to the right. Then you add the percent symbol, and like the example before, you might need to put 1 or more zeros in the number. So if I want to write 47 hundredths as a percent, I can take that decimal, I can multiply by 100 by moving the decimal 2 places to the right, and that makes 47%. If I have 663 thousandths, again, I just move it 2 places to the right. You're not moving it all the way to the end, you're just moving it 2 places, and that is 66.3%. I could have a whole number and a decimal, so 1.8, 1 and 8 tenths. Do it the same way, but when I move it, I have to add a 0, so that makes 180%. Let's think about what that means. If 100% is a whole, one whole is 100%, then here's the whole. The one whole is the 100%, and the 8 tenths is the 80%. All right, so if you have something that's bigger than 1, then you have to have something that's bigger than 100. All right, and here's something that's really small. So we've got 9 thousandths. Do it the same way. 2 places to the right, and now you have 0.9%. So it's okay to have a decimal. It's okay to have a percent that is less than one whole, This one is close to a whole right. It's 0.9%, so it's almost 1 whole percent. All right, you've got 4 U tries. Okay, then the next section, we're going to write percents as fractions. So just think about what percent means, okay? Percent means per, which means to divide by, 100. So 75% means 75 per 100, or 75 divided by 100. So I will remove the percent sign, write the percent over 100, and then simplify to lowest terms. So for this problem, I would take it one step further and I would say 75%, because a cent is 100. And then to simplify that, I would divide by 25 over 25, and that gives me 3/4. 75% is equal to 3/4. Right? Here's one that is similar. 35% is 35 per 100. And I can see that those are both divisible by 5. So I divide 35 divided by 5 is 7, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. Right? So you have to simplify. 35% is equal to 7/20. For 6%, I start by writing 6 per cent, or 6 per 100. Those are both even numbers, so I know that I can divide by 2, which gives me 3/50. And since 3 is prime and it doesn't go into 50, I know I'm finished. Ooh, here's one that's a decimal. This is a little tricky. So I start the same way, 0.5 per cent. But you can't leave a decimal in your fraction. Okay, you can't, that's not proper. You can't write it that way. So you need to move that decimal to the end. The way you do that is by multiplying the numerator and denominator by 10. When you multiply 0.5, which is half of 10 is 5, so that moves it one place. And then 100 times 10 is 1,000, and now you still need to simplify. So when you divide that by 5, you get 1/200. All right, let's think about that. Does that make sense? Here I have half of a percent, half of 1%. So if 1% is 1/100th, then half of a percent must be a 200th. Half of 100th is a 200th. Those things don't look alike, but they are the same. They are equivalent. Okay, now we are going the other way. We've got something that's bigger than 100, so we're going to write 110 per 100. And then I know that I can divide by 10, and that'll give me 11/10. And in this problem, it makes sense to show that as a mixed number. 11/10 is the same as 1 and 1/10. And we can see that here. The whole is the 100%, one whole is 100%, and then you have 10%, or a tenth, left. Okay, next section. Now we're writing a decimal as a fraction. This is a new idea. This is always a little surprising and new. When you want to write a decimal as a fraction, start by just saying the decimal number aloud using its correct place value, and then you'll be able to write it as a fraction with a denominator of either 10 or 100 or 1,000, etc. And then you have to simplify. So if I have 0.3, instead of saying 0.3, say 3/10. Oh, well, I can write 3/10 as a fraction, and then I'll simplify as needed. So this is not 0.4, this is 4/10. And I can simplify 4/10 by dividing the numerator and denominator by 2, so I have 2/5. This is not 0.38, that's 38/100. And I see that I can also simplify that down to 19/50. 19 is prime and it does not go into 50, so that one's finished. Hey, we're halfway done. Okay, read this number. This number is 12 thousandths. 12 thousandths. And, oh, let's just see what happens if we divide it in half. Let's make it 6/500ths. Oh, no, those are still both even numbers. So now I'll take it down to 3/250. Okay, now I know I'm finished. I'm doing divisibility rules in 6th grade, and we know that 250 is not divisible by 3 because I can say 2 plus 5 plus 0 is 7. Do you remember doing that? And 7 is not divisible by 3, so 250 is not divisible by 3. I don't know if you remember that or not. All right, so when I read 3.15, that is 3 and 15/100ths. 3 and 15/100ths. Then I can simplify the 15/100ths. Let's divide by 5. And so that is 3 and 3/20ths. Okay. Right. To write a fraction as a decimal, this one has 2 ideas here. So in the first case, this one you can kind of use mental math. If the fraction has a denominator that's a power of 10, then you can just say the fraction aloud to yourself, and then you'll be able to write it as a decimal using the correct place value. For example, if it's 3/10, has a 10 on the bottom, oh, that's 3/10, which I can write as 3/10. So if it has tenths or hundredths or thousandths, you can just read it aloud and write it. But if it doesn't have a denominator that is a power of 10, then you have to divide the numerator by the denominator. So if I have 3 divided by 8, or 3/8, I can do 3 divided by 8. Hopefully you know how to do division by hand, but since you're in advanced 2, you are allowed to use a calculator. So now you've got 0.375 or 375, where am I? Thousandths. All right. Okay. So now we've got 35 thousandths. Oh, okay. That's a power of 10. I can write 35 thousandths. Be careful that that 5 is in the thousandths place. If you do this, that is not 35 thousandths. That's 35 hundredths. Okay. Be sure you get the 5 in the thousandths place. All right. 2/3. Well, 3 is not a power of 10. So if you don't already know this one in your head, then you can do 2 divided by 3. Do you know what it is? It's 0.66666, and then your calculator rounds that last place to the to a 7. So you can write that as 0.66 repeating. Put the little line. All right, got 2 of those. Almost finished. Okay, then the last section also has two parts. Now we're writing a fraction as a percent. If the fraction has a denominator that is a factor of 100, then you can use some mental math to make an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. And then since percent means per 100, then you can just write that fraction as a percent. I fixed that on your copy. So if you have a fraction like 7/20, where 20 goes evenly into 100, then you can do some mental math and say, well, I need to multiply 20 times 5 to make 100, so I can multiply 7 times 5 to make 35, and now I've got 35%. But if the denominator is not a power of 10, then you have to go through the same steps that we did before. You already know how to do everything, you just have to put it together. Take the numerator divided by the denominator. 3 divided by 8 is 0.375. We did that up above. And then you move the decimal 2 places to the right to make that 37.5%. Do 2 more together. So if I have 4/5, the first thing I do is check to see, will 5 go into 100? Yes, it will. I know that to get 5 into 100, I have to multiply by 20. 100 doesn't have a whole lot of factors, so it's pretty easy to learn the ones that will go evenly in. 5 times 20 is 100, and 4 times 20 is 80. 80 per 100, that's 80%. And then we've got 5/8. Well, 8 does not go into 100, so I need to do 5 divided by 8, and oh, what the heck. Let's just do this one by hand. 8 goes into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract 2. Bring down. 8 goes into 20. Let's see, 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. And 8 goes into 45 times. You do not have to do it by hand. It is fine to use a calculator. Right? And then we're going to move that decimal 2 places to the right to make 62.5%. Okay, so you know how to do all the parts. It's just putting all of the parts together. And then you have 2 U-tries.